Welcome to another episode of Trump's Tariff Gamble, America's Tariff War. Who wins and who loses? On Life Facts Daily, we'll be having insight on the ripple effects of tariffs, the price of survival, tariffs, and America's food supply. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share our channel. On Life Facts Daily, you scan the same groceries, and suddenly the total at checkout has doubled. Everyday essentials now feel like luxury items. Should you stock up before prices climb even higher? The answer lies in tariffs. Hidden costs added long before products even hit the shelves. These costs ripple through the entire supply chain, from importers to distributors, from stores straight into your wallet. Some products rise in price almost overnight, while others wait like ticking time bombs until contracts reset. Today, we're diving deep into how tariffs are reshaping the lives of ordinary Americans and revealing who is really paying the price. To President Trump, America's trade deficit wasn't just a statistic, it was a national emergency. His administration's response? Tariffs slapped on nearly the entire world. It started with a 10% baseline tariff on imports, followed by targeted tariffs against specific nations. Global markets stumbled, suffering their worst drop since the 2020 COVID crash. The U.S. economy itself faltered as trade wars ignited with Canada and Mexico, while tensions with China flared to new heights. And yet, in the chaos, billions of dollars vanished overnight. A temporary pause in tariffs brought short-lived relief, but soon the hammer fell again. Even bizarre moves, like placing tariffs on uninhabited islands populated only by penguins, only added to the confusion. But here's the real question. What does all of this mean for you, the average consumer? One of the most important battles in this tariff war has been waged over steel and aluminum, two metals that shape our everyday lives, from cars and appliances to military hardware. In 2018, the U.S. declared them a matter of national security and imposed a sweeping 25% tariff on imports, exempting only a handful of allies. That move brought some growth in American production and jobs, but also unleashed a tidal wave of rising costs across countless industries. Prices for steel and aluminum surged far faster in the U.S. than anywhere else in the world. Between 2017 and 2021, hot-rolled steel prices skyrocketed by more than 160%. Aluminum jumped by nearly 50%. The result? Higher costs for everything: cars, tools, electronics, housing materials, and even canned goods. Downstream industries, like machinery, auto parts, and construction, lost billions. Small contractors struggled to compete against big corporations that could absorb the shocks. Families saw home building costs soar, while ordinary shoppers were hit hardest at the grocery store, the car dealership, and even the clothing aisle. And it didn't stop there. Tariffs on Chinese imports drove up prices on electronics, furniture, and kitchen cabinets. Household spending ballooned as nearly every imported good rose in price. Even tiny purchases under $800, once duty-free, are now taxed, leaving consumers with shocking bills for everyday online orders. The burden is clear. While tariffs were meant to protect U.S. industry, most of the costs have landed directly on the American people. From inflation at the checkout counter to rising rent, to the price tag on your next car, tariffs are shaping the future of the economy in ways most people never imagined. But here's the dangerous part. This might only be the beginning. Experts warn that if tariffs continue to expand unchecked, inflation could spiral, supply chains could collapse, and ordinary families could face even harsher realities. And that brings us to the question we'll explore next. What happens if these tariffs push the U.S. economy to the breaking point? Could America face a full-scale economic crash? When tariffs were first introduced, supporters argued they would spark a manufacturing renaissance in America. And at first glance, it looked like they might. Domestic steel mills roared back to life. Miners returned to work, and wages in certain industries ticked upward. But beneath the surface, a very different story was unfolding. As prices climbed, downstream industries, the businesses that use steel, aluminum, and other imported goods, began to buckle. Machinery manufacturers, auto part producers and construction firms saw their costs soar. For them, tariffs weren't protection, they were punishment. By 2021, the U.S. International Trade Commission estimated that American industries had lost an average of $3.4 billion in value due to steel and aluminum tariffs alone. And the pain wasn't evenly spread. Smaller firms, those without the cash reserves of corporate giants, struggled the most. Many couldn't absorb the extra cost and were forced to either raise prices or shut their doors. For consumers, the results were unavoidable. The price of U.S.-made cars climbed steadily, appliances jumped, and even HVAC systems became more expensive. Contractors began bidding higher on projects, pushing home prices beyond the reach of many first-time buyers. But perhaps the most dramatic impact has been on everyday essentials. Canned food, soda, kitchen tools, even sneakers and school clothes. As tariffs spread across industries, Americans began to feel the pinch at every corner of their daily lives. Clothing alone saw a 37% spike, hitting low-income families the hardest. And while some argued tariffs would punish China, the reality was far more complicated. Instead of absorbing the costs, most Chinese manufacturers simply passed them on. Importers in the U.S. paid more, distributors paid more, stores paid more, and ultimately, you paid more. The math is brutally simple. Nearly every dollar added by tariffs is a dollar taken from American consumers. But here's where things get even darker. The suspension of duty-free imports under $800, once a safeguard for ordinary shoppers, meant that even small online orders now carry hidden costs. Americans buying toys, electronics, or clothing online suddenly faced shocking increases at checkout. E-commerce giants like Amazon tried to soften the blow, but even they couldn't stop the inevitable. Higher prices, lower sales, and frustrated customers. And this ripple effect has just begun. With new 2025 tariffs targeting auto parts, consumer electronics, and construction materials, experts predict another surge in prices in the coming months. Yale's Budget Lab estimates that the average American household could spend an extra $2,400 this year alone because of tariffs. But what happens when rising costs collide with another looming threat? America's housing market. If tariffs continue to drive up the price of steel, aluminum, and lumber, the dream of home ownership may slip even further out of reach for millions. And that leads to our next chapter. Could tariffs trigger a housing crisis that reshapes the American middle class? For generations, owning a home has been the cornerstone of the American dream. But today, that dream is slipping further away, not only because of high interest rates and limited supply, but also because of tariffs quietly reshaping the cost of construction. Think about what goes into a single home. Steel beams, aluminum siding, copper wiring, roofing materials, lumber, plumbing fixtures, appliances, and more. Every piece of that puzzle is affected by global trade. When tariffs drive up the cost of these raw materials, the price of building a home doesn't just rise, it skyrockets. Since the 2018 steel and aluminum tariffs, construction costs in the U.S. have surged far beyond inflation. Lumber prices, already volatile due to supply chain disruptions, jumped even higher when paired with tariffs on Canadian imports. Add in new tariffs on Chinese-made furniture, cabinets, and flooring, and suddenly the cost of finishing a house doubled in just a few years. Developers are caught in a bind. They either build fewer homes or pass the higher cost directly to buyers. The result? A housing market where starter homes are disappearing and the average sale price has become unreachable for middle-class families. But the pressure doesn't stop with buyers. Renters feel the heat, too. As construction costs rise, landlords demand higher rent to cover expenses on repairs, renovations, and new developments. In cities like Los Angeles, New York, and Dallas, renters already struggling with affordability now face steeper hikes, pushing many into financial distress. This hidden effect of tariffs, pricing Americans out of both homeownership and rental stability, is one of the least discussed but most devastating consequences of trade wars. Economists warn that if tariffs remain or expand, the U.S. could face a generational housing crisis where millions of young Americans never achieve home ownership. while older generations cling to property that becomes increasingly valuable but inaccessible. And that has ripple effects beyond economics. Housing insecurity destabilizes communities, reduces mobility, and even reshapes politics. A society where fewer people own homes is one where inequality deepens, generational wealth disappears, and frustration grows. But tariffs don't just affect homes and apartments. They ripple through another critical sector: automobiles. From steel frames to aluminum parts to imported electronics, cars are becoming more expensive than ever. So here's the question we'll explore in the next part. If tariffs continue to push car prices out of reach, could America's auto industry collapse under its own weight? For decades, the U.S. auto industry has been a symbol of American strength. Detroit's Big Three churning out millions of vehicles that define not only the economy, but the culture itself. Cars are freedom, identity, and necessity rolled into one. But tariffs are threatening to make that freedom more expensive than ever. It starts with steel and aluminum. Modern vehicles, from compact sedans to heavy-duty trucks, depend on these metals for frames, engines, and safety features. With tariffs inflating raw material prices by 25% or more, the cost of building a single car rises thousands of dollars before it even leaves the factory floor. But that's only the beginning. Automobiles today are more computers than machines. From chips to sensors, batteries to touch screens, countless components come from overseas. When tariffs hit Chinese imports, the cost of these parts soared. And with electric vehicles, the so-called future of transportation, relying heavily on imported batteries and rare earth materials, tariffs have created a massive barrier to EV adoption. The result? Sticker shock. The average new car price in the U.S. has already climbed past $48,000, the highest in history. Add tariffs, and the number rises even faster. Families that once traded in for a new vehicle every few years are now holding on to cars for longer. Used car prices have skyrocketed as demand outpaces supply, and the impact stretches beyond drivers. Auto workers, many of whom hoped tariffs would revive domestic manufacturing, are caught in the middle. While some plants saw short-term boosts, others faced layoffs as foreign automakers scaled back U.S. production or moved facilities elsewhere to avoid higher costs. Dealerships are also struggling. With fewer affordable options, sales are slipping. Financing becomes harder to secure as banks tighten lending, and buyers grow wary of taking on massive loans for vehicles that should have been within reach. And then comes the ripple effect. Trucking companies face higher costs for fleets, pushing shipping prices up. Rideshare drivers pay more to maintain vehicles, which means higher fares for passengers. Delivery services, from Amazon to your local grocery store, pass rising vehicle costs straight back to consumers. This isn't just about cars. It's about an entire ecosystem of transportation becoming more expensive, less accessible, and increasingly unstable. But here's the critical question. If tariffs keep driving car prices higher, could America's auto industry crash the same way the housing market once did, leaving ordinary families drowning in debt and the economy teetering on the edge? And beyond cars lies another essential sector just as vulnerable: healthcare. From surgical tools to life-saving medicines, tariffs are beginning to touch the very systems that keep Americans alive. If there's one thing every American depends on, it's healthcare. Whether it's a routine checkup, a life-saving surgery, or a simple prescription refill, access to affordable care is essential. But tariffs are quietly pushing that cost higher, turning survival into a luxury few can comfortably afford. At first, it may seem surprising. After all, what do tariffs on steel, aluminum, or electronics have to do with healthcare? The answer: everything. Start with medical equipment. From MRI scanners to surgical instruments, from hospital beds to wheelchairs, most rely on imported metals, plastics, and microchips. Tariffs inflate the cost of every component, which hospitals then pass down to patients through higher bills. A single hip replacement, for example, can now cost thousands more because the titanium and specialized tools used in surgery are more expensive. Then there's pharmaceuticals. The U.S. imports a massive share of its medicines, or at least the raw ingredients used to make them, from abroad. Tariffs on chemicals, packaging, and even transportation costs ripple through the pharmaceutical supply chain. Drugs that were already expensive, like insulin, creep higher in price, leaving patients with impossible choices: pay the bill, ration doses, or go without. Hospitals themselves are not immune. Tariffs on construction materials drive up the cost of expanding facilities, building new wings, or even maintaining existing infrastructure. For patients, this translates to higher fees, longer wait times, and reduced access to care in underserved areas. And perhaps most dangerously, tariffs disrupt global supply chains for critical items like ventilators, personal protective equipment, and diagnostic devices. During times of crisis, pandemics, natural disasters, or emergencies, shortages become more severe and prices spike when Americans need help most. For ordinary families, the impact is devastating. A medical bill is already the #1 cause of bankruptcy in America. Add tariff-driven inflation, and healthcare becomes an even heavier burden. The cruel reality? Tariffs meant to protect U.S. industries are, in many cases, threatening American lives. Doctors, nurses, and patient advocates warn that the trend is unsustainable. If tariffs continue unchecked, the cost of staying alive in America could reach levels never seen before, deepening inequality and leaving millions more uninsured or underinsured. But healthcare isn't the only sector where the stakes are life or death. Another silent casualty of tariffs is emerging in the world's most essential resource: food. Food isn't optional. It's the foundation of survival, culture, and community. Yet tariffs have quietly crept into America's kitchens, driving up the cost of everything from milk and bread to steak and vegetables. The impact is felt most painfully by working-class families, where every dollar counts. The story begins with farmers. America's agricultural industry is one of the largest exporters in the world, feeding not just Americans, but millions overseas. When tariffs ignite trade wars, foreign buyers often retaliate with tariffs of their own, targeting U.S. crops like soybeans, corn, wheat, and pork. Suddenly, American farmers lose access to international markets. Prices collapse at home, and entire harvests rot unsold. To survive, many farmers turn to government subsidies, temporary lifelines that keep them afloat but do little to solve the underlying problem. Meanwhile, retaliatory tariffs from countries like China, Mexico, and Canada reshape global food trade, forcing American farmers into deeper uncertainty. But while farmers struggle, consumers don't see savings. Quite the opposite. Tariffs on imported goods like fruits, vegetables, seafood, and packaged foods push grocery prices upward. Everyday staples like rice, pasta, and cooking oil now come with hidden costs. Families feel it every time they check out at the supermarket, where a week's groceries cost what used to last two. And it's not just produce. Meat prices have soared as tariffs hit animal feed, transportation, and refrigeration. Dairy has grown more expensive as aluminum tariffs push up the cost of cans for milk powder, cheese, and baby formula. Even beer and soda are caught in the crossfire, with aluminum cans costing breweries and bottlers millions more, costs they pass directly to customers. For restaurants, tariffs are a crushing blow. Rising costs on imported ingredients and kitchen supplies force owners to raise menu prices or shut their doors. Small diners and family-owned eateries, the heart of many communities, are closing faster than ever, unable to compete with corporate chains that can absorb the shocks. And the greatest danger? Food insecurity. Low-income families, already living paycheck to paycheck, now face impossible choices between groceries, rent, and medical bills. Food banks report rising demand, while inflation fueled by tariffs stretches donations thin. Experts warn that if tariffs expand further, America could see levels of hunger not witnessed in decades. But food is only one part of the equation. Tariffs don't just raise costs at the grocery store. They ripple through the global energy system as well. Fuel, electricity, and natural gas all are vulnerable to trade wars that drive prices higher. And that sets the stage for the next chapter. What happens when tariffs collide with the world's energy supply? Could America face an energy crisis that darkens the future? Energy isn't just another industry. It's the engine that drives every home, business, and military on Earth. From the lights in your living room to the servers hosting this video, nothing runs without it. But tariffs are rapidly reshaping America's energy landscape, and the fallout could leave millions in the dark, literally. Let's start with oil and gas. The United States is one of the world's largest producers, but energy independence is more fragile than many think. Tariffs on imported drilling equipment, pipelines, and specialized steel have driven up production costs, making oil more expensive to extract and refine. That means higher prices at the pump. Every time you fill up your car, you're paying not just for the oil, but for the trade wars wrapped around it. Natural gas, once seen as a cheap and stable alternative, is also under pressure. Tariffs on aluminum and steel affect the massive infrastructure needed to transport liquefied natural gas, LNG, across the globe. Retaliatory tariffs from Europe and Asia threaten U.S. exports, cutting into profits and destabilizing prices at home. As global demand wavers, American households are left footing the bill with climbing utility costs. Then there's the future of energy, renewables. Clean energy is supposed to be the escape hatch, a way to free ourselves from oil wars and climate disasters. But tariffs on imported solar panels, batteries, and rare earth minerals are slowing progress to a crawl. Solar installations have dropped in key states. Wind turbine projects have been delayed, and electric vehicles, the supposed future of transportation, are now pricier than ever thanks to tariffs on lithium, cobalt, and semiconductors. The result? America risks losing its competitive edge in the global energy race. China, Europe, and other nations push forward, subsidizing their clean energy industries while the U.S. struggles under layers of tariffs that were meant to protect domestic producers, but instead stifle innovation. And the scariest part? Energy tariffs don't just raise bills. They make America less secure. Power grids depend on affordable equipment. The military relies on both traditional fuels and advanced batteries. If tariffs choke supply lines and inflate costs, the nation could find itself vulnerable in ways far more dangerous than higher grocery or gas bills. So the question becomes, are tariffs protecting America's future or sabotaging it from within? Tariffs are sold as weapons of strength, tools to defend American jobs, rebuild industries, and punish nations that play unfair. But the truth is far more complicated. Tariffs are taxes, and like all taxes, they trickle down. From groceries to gas, from clothing to cars, the burden doesn't fall on foreign nations alone. It falls squarely on the shoulders of the American consumer. Farmers watch their fields go unsold. Families see their grocery bills double. Contractors lose bids. Small businesses shutter. And households pay hundreds, sometimes thousands more each year just to survive. All while political leaders frame tariffs as victories in a global chess match that most Americans never asked to play. Yes, they're winners. Domestic steel and aluminum producers. A handful of energy companies. Certain niche industries that thrive when foreign competition is shut out. But for every one winner, there are dozens of losers. Families, workers, and small businesses crushed under the weight of rising costs. The ultimate irony? The very trade deficits tariffs are supposed to fix often grow worse. By locking poor nations out of markets, the U.S. ensures they stay too poor to buy American goods. By making imports more expensive, the U.S. drives inflation higher, cutting into purchasing power and slowing economic growth. Tariffs, meant to be shields, risk becoming swords turned inward. And that leaves us with the final question. How long can the average American bear the cost before the system cracks? Because when food, fuel, and housing all become unaffordable, the tipping point won't just be economic. It will be political. It will be social. And it could reshape the very foundation of American life. For more chilling videos, subscribe, like, and share the channel. On Life Facts Daily.